Return of the Living Dead is not just a zombie classic. It's one of the most genuinely unwinnable apocalypse scenarios ever put on screen, and most people completely miss that because they were too busy watching the cemetery scene or laughing at the punk kids to actually stop and think about what was happening underneath all of it. But when you sit down and actually trace how the trioxin gas works, see what it does to the dead, what it does to the living, what it does to the environment, you start to realize something pretty disturbing. Nobody in that world ever had a chance. Not because the characters made bad decisions, but because the rules of that world were already broken before the movie even started. And in this video, I want to walk you through exactly why. Let's start with something most people gloss over in about 30 seconds of screen time. This wasn't a virus, it wasn't a pandemic, it wasn't some natural disaster that nobody saw coming. The zombie outbreak in Return of the Living Dead happened because the US military created a chemical compound called trioxin, ran experiments on it, got results they weren't expecting, and then did what the government does best with problems it doesn't know how to handle. They buried it. Not metaphorically, literally. They sealed the contaminated material in steel barrels, shipped those barrels through the military logistics chain, and somewhere in that process, through bad paperwork, through negligence, through some mid-level officer who just didn't want to deal with it, a couple of those barrels ended up in the basement of a medical supply warehouse in Louisville, Kentucky. A civilian building. No safety protocols, no trained personnel, no warning labels that actually explained what was inside. And that's the setup. Not a lab accident, not a natural mutation. A decision somebody made, a piece of paper somebody signed, a problem somebody consciously chose to put somewhere it wouldn't be their problem anymore. The world of Return of the Living Dead was already contaminated before any character in the movie took a single breath. Now, when the barrel leaks, here's what trioxin actually does. And this is where things start getting genuinely bad. The gas doesn't just affect the air in the immediate area. It penetrates surfaces. It soaks into walls, into the floor, into the soil, and it reanimates the dead. Not just fresh bodies, not just recently deceased people. It reanimates corpses that have been embalmed, chemically treated, preserved. The whole funeral preparation process that's specifically designed to prevent decomposition, and it brings them back anyway. Trioxin doesn't care. So when the characters in the film figure that out and try the obvious solution, burn the body, problem solved, that's when the movie really twists the knife. The smoke from burning a trioxin contaminated corpse goes into the atmosphere, and when that smoke hits moisture in the clouds, it comes back down as rain. Contaminated rain. Rain that falls on every cemetery, every funeral home, every patch of ground with anything buried in it within range of those clouds. Louisville, Kentucky has over 25 cemeteries just within the city limits, not counting the surrounding suburbs, not counting the bodies in hospital morgues, not counting funeral homes with bodies waiting for services. You see where this goes. One barrel in one basement becomes a rain event that becomes dozens of cemeteries waking up simultaneously, and each of those newly reanimated dead, if you try to burn them, which you will, because that's the instinct, releases more gas, which becomes more rain, which wakes up more dead. It's not a zombie outbreak. It's a chain reaction with no off switch. And the government's response when this starts happening, a guy named Bert, who owns the warehouse where the barrel leaked, gets on the phone with the military. And the military doesn't send help. They send a protocol, a trained voice that knows exactly how to say nothing useful while sounding official. And when they finally do decide to act, the action they choose is a nuclear strike on Louisville, a bomb on an American city without evacuating anyone. That tells you everything you need to know about how this world's power structure operates. The same institution that created trioxin lost track of it, buried it in a civilian building, and denied it existed. That institution's answer to the problem getting out of hand is to eliminate the evidence along with the witnesses. Let's talk about the zombies themselves, because this is where Return of the Living Dead completely separates itself from every other zombie franchise, and not in a good way for anyone trying to survive. You know the rules. Everybody knows the rules. If you grew up watching The Walking Dead, if you've played any zombie video game in the last 20 years, if you've seen Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, any of it, the rule is the same. Destroy the brain. The brain is the control center. You shut down the brain, you shut down the walker, remember, the characters in this movie know that rule too. They've seen the same movies we have. So when they get a hold of a reanimated corpse, that's exactly what they try. They destroy the brain completely. The zombie keeps moving. Trioxin doesn't work through the central nervous system. It works on a cellular level. Every tissue, every cell that's been exposed to the compound retains motor function independently. There's no single point of failure. There's no off switch you can hit. The thing keeps coming because every part of it individually is still animated. You cannot kill something that's already dead and doesn't need a brain to function. That alone makes survival essentially impossible in any sustained conflict. But then the movie adds something that I think is genuinely one of the most disturbing details in zombie cinema, and it almost never gets talked about the way it deserves. These zombies feel pain. There's a moment in the film where one of the characters communicates with a partially destroyed zombie and asks why they eat brains. The answer she gives is that being dead hurts, that the pain of being dead is constant and overwhelming, and that eating brains is the only thing that makes it stop, even temporarily. So what you're looking at isn't mindless undead shambling around on instinct. You're looking at entities that are in constant, excruciating pain, with just enough cognition left to understand that eating will relieve it temporarily, but not enough to process what happened to them, not enough to remember who they were, and absolutely no possibility that it ever gets better. They're not monsters. They're people, or whatever's left of people, trapped in a permanent state of agony with no way out. That's the part that makes this movie genuinely disturbing if you sit with it for more than 30 seconds. But it gets worse because these zombies are also smart. There's a sequence in the film where a group of zombies capture a police radio and use it to broadcast a message requesting more paramedics to their location. They understand how emergency response works. They understand that if they call for help, more living people will come to them. They're using your own infrastructure against you. Think about what that means in a real collapse scenario. Against a slow, dumb walker that you can put down with a baseball bat and some basic situational awareness, you've got a chance. The Walking Dead builds its entire survival logic around that. You learn the patterns, you stay quiet, you manage your resources, you build walls, you establish safe zones. None of that works here. You're dealing with something that can't be put down permanently, that is relentless because it's in constant pain, that is intelligent enough to run tactical plays against you. And that multiplies every single time it kills someone. And every time you try to burn one, which is the first thing any normal person is going to try, you're adding more trioxin to the atmosphere. Every defensive action makes the overall situation worse. There's no version of clearing an area that works. There's no fortification strategy that holds indefinitely. There's no safe zone that isn't eventually compromised by the next rain event waking up whatever's buried under it. Put yourself inside this scenario for a second, not as a movie protagonist, not with any special skills or plot armor, just you, where you actually live, with what you actually have access to. The contaminated rain fell on the cemetery 3 miles from your house last night. You don't know that yet. You're asleep or watching something or talking to somebody, and somewhere around midnight, you start hearing sounds outside you can't immediately explain. You look out the window, you can't process what you're seeing. You grab your phone, you try to pull up news, try to call someone, try to figure out what's happening. Nothing useful is coming back. The EAS alert that goes out is vague. FEMA's website is down from traffic. Local news is showing helicopter footage of something, but nobody's saying anything definitive yet. Let's say you survive the first few hours, you lock down, you stay quiet, you've got a few days of food and water. Maybe you've got a firearm, a Glock 19 in the nightstand, a shotgun in the closet, whatever. Maybe you've got a bug out bag because you were one of those people. What happens next? Nothing good. Because surviving the first night isn't the beginning of a story where things improve. It's just the beginning of a longer, slower version of the same problem. You can't leave. Going outside means exposure. And in this world, exposure isn't just the risk of getting attacked. It's the risk of breathing air in zones where gas is still active, the risk of getting hit by rain you don't know is contaminated, the risk of contact with soil that's already saturated with trioxin. You don't know which areas are clear because there's no mapping system, no rapid test, no reliable information being distributed. You can't trust anyone you meet, not because everyone's bad, but because You have no way of knowing who's been exposed, who's in an early stage of something you don't understand, or who's just desperate enough to be a threat, completely separate from the zombie problem. And history, Katrina, COVID, every disaster scenario that's actually happened tells us that interpersonal violence between survivors starts faster than anyone wants to admit. Water, food, medicine, fuel, ammo, those are the axes everything reorganizes around. Whoever gets there first with enough force makes the rules. Your resources are depleting in a straight line while the problem grows exponentially. Every day you're inside, you have less food, less water, less physical health, less mental clarity to make good decisions. Every day outside, more bodies are waking up, more territories getting contaminated, more of whatever window you might have had is closing. Now run that out 6 months. Not 6 months of dramatic movie apocalypse where exciting things happen and you have character development. 6 months real. 6 months of genuine deprivation, constant low-level terror, no doctor when something goes wrong, no dentist when a tooth starts going bad, no power when the generator runs out, no new information, no indication that anything is getting better. That level of sustained psychological pressure doesn't just make people sad. It breaks something fundamental in how people process reality, how they make decisions, how they relate to other people. The psychiatric literature on long-term isolation and chronic stress is pretty clear on this. Humans are not built for that sustained a threat level with that little hope of resolution. And here's where Return of the Living Dead becomes genuinely crueler than almost any other zombie scenario on film. In The Walking Dead, and look, the show has plenty of problems, but the internal logic is at least survivable. The dead are slow, they're patterned, they're predictable enough that communities can actually form. Alexandria works, the kingdom works, the hilltop works. Humans adapt because the threat is manageable once you understand it. You can build walls, you can clear areas, you can establish zones and hold them. In 28 days later, the infected burn out. They're terrifying in the acute phase, but they're not permanent. They starve. Time is at least partially on the side of anyone who can outlast the initial wave. In World War Z, the movie at least, there's still a functioning military structure. There are still labs. There are still organized evacuation zones. It's hell, but there's a framework. Here, the trioxin is in the soil. It's in the water table, wherever contaminated rain fell. It's in every body, in every cemetery, every funeral home, every hospital morgue in the affected area. And it's going to stay there. Because you can't dig up and incinerate every burial site in the country without releasing the gas and making it worse. Any safe zone you build is sitting on top of a time bomb. Surviving in this world isn't a victory. It's a sentence with no end date. Let me lay out exactly why this world has no exit, because I want to be specific about this. The first problem is what I'd call the hidden inventory problem. Nobody knows how many trioxin barrels exist. The film shows 2 of them in a Louisville warehouse, but that military program ran for decades. How many facilities received material? How many barrels got lost in bad paperwork transfers? Just like the 2 in the movie, how many are sitting in storage facilities that the relevant agencies have no current record of? These barrels don't disappear. They age, they corrode. Each one is a future event waiting to happen on its own timeline, completely independent of anything the survivors are doing. If 1 barrel in 1 warehouse basement was enough to trigger what the film shows, what happens when a second barrel corrodes through somewhere in Ohio the following spring, or a third one in a depot in Nevada the year after that? The second problem is the technical learning gap. To actually fight trioxin, you'd need science, you'd need functioning labs, working equipment, researchers who are alive and not currently trying to survive, a supply chain that can support sustained research and time, years of it under ideal conditions. You'd need all of that at the exact moment that the entire infrastructure supporting that kind of work is collapsing. Universities are gone, hospital systems are gone. The researchers who might be able to work on this are just trying to find food and water like everyone else. The equipment they'd need doesn't have power. The data they'd need to reference is on servers that went offline when the grid went down. The knowledge to potentially solve this might exist somewhere in the heads of the right people, but the system you'd need to apply that knowledge has been destroyed before it could be used. The third problem is the geometry of expansion. Every zombie creates more zombies by killing victims. Every attempt to burn the dead releases more gas. Every rain event expands the contamination radius. The problem doesn't grow linearly, fine. It compounds. And the human response to it in every natural direction people would go makes the compounding faster. The fourth problem is the one that kills any long-term hope. The nuclear option only works once. At the end of the film, the military drops a bomb on Louisville. It solves the immediate local problem. But the rain already fell. The clouds already moved. Other cemeteries in other cities are already waking up. The military's answer to each of those is another bomb on every neighborhood that reports an outbreak. Every time a new barrel corrodes somewhere new, that's not militarily viable, it's not politically possible, it's not physically sustainable, and every bomb is also a conventional explosion that kicks debris and contaminated material into the atmosphere, potentially spreading trioxin further in the process. The solution creates a version of the problem it was supposed to solve. There's a logic to this world that I find genuinely unsettling the more I think about it. Every decision the characters make, i.e., every decision anyone could reasonably make, feeds the system. Hide the problem, it gets worse quietly. Destroy the bodies by burning, it gets worse faster. Call for help. The infrastructure meant to help brings more victims. Use military force, it spreads the agent wider. It's almost like the world of this movie operates on a rule where every attempt at control generates a larger version of the thing you were trying to control. That's not accidental, that's a very specific kind of horror. So let's bring it home. Return of the Living Dead gets dismissed pretty often as a cult oddity. The punk aesthetic, the dark comedy, the intentionally absurd moments. People file it under fun trash horror and move on, but underneath all of that, under the leather jackets and the screaming and the over-the-top gore, there's an idea in this movie that is genuinely, uncomfortably serious. The idea of a problem that was created by institutional negligence, buried by bureaucratic self-interest, hidden because accountability was inconvenient, and then allowed to age quietly until the moment it became impossible to contain. And then, when it finally broke open, the same institution that created it chose solutions that protected itself over solutions that protected people. That's not a zombie movie fantasy. That's a pattern with real-world precedents that most of us could name without thinking too hard. And I think that's actually why Return of the Living Dead still lands the way it does after all these years. Because the trioxin isn't really the scariest part of the movie. The scariest part is how the barrel ended up in that basement in the first place. Because that part required no supernatural element at all. Just paperwork. Just someone deciding it was easier to sign off and move on. Just a problem being somebody else's problem until it wasn't anybody's problem. And then it was everybody's problem at once. And by the time that happens in the movie, by the time anyone understands what they're actually dealing with, it's already too late to do anything about it. The dead can't be killed, the gas can't be contained, the fire spreads it, the rain spreads it. The government lies, the people don't understand what's happening. And every cemetery in the country is full. That's not a survival scenario. That's a closed loop with no exit. So did you ever actually think this movie was that dark underneath the surface? Or was it just the punk zombie movie with the smart zombies until right now? Drop it in the comments. See, because genuinely, the more time I spend thinking about this world, the worse it gets. If you want more deep dives like this one, hit the like button. It actually does make a massive difference for the channel. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if there's another zombie universe you want me to put through the same kind of analysis, leave it below. I've got a list and it's getting long. Thanks for watching the whole thing. I'll see you in the next one.